Where did the Conservative Party go wrong? James Cumming, a former MP, laid out his answers in an internal review today. He looked at the 2021 campaign. Mr. Cummings, who lost his seat in the last election, conducted close to 400 interviews with MPs, party insiders, and others to find out what happened. Now he's also made recommendations and he's pitched them to his party. And he presented them inside. Remember, the Conservatives have 119 seats in the House of Commons. Compare that to 2019 federal election when they won 121, so they actually lost seats. Now, it's a confidential report, but what do they need to do differently this time? And what does this mean for the leadership of Erin O'Toole? Let's try to find out. Joining me now is former Conservative MP James Cumming. Mr. Cumming, you just completed this internal review to the Conservative Party of the 2021 election campaign. You presented it today, so great to have you on the program. You know, we've heard the leaks from this. I know it's a confidential document, but the big takeaways, what were the big takeaways, what went wrong here? What did go wrong?
Well, thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me on your show. And, you know, I did present to caucus today. We did a very comprehensive report. We talked to and had submissions from over 400 people across Canada, from candidates, from campaign managers, from activists, a whole raft of people. And, you know, obviously the main thing that went wrong, we didn't win the election. So, you know, anytime that an event like that takes place, I think it's prudent for a party to look at what went right and what went wrong and provide a report to the leadership, to caucus. My understanding, this is the first time in recent history that a report of this kind of consequence and detail has been provided to both the leader and caucus and to National Council. And it has dozens upon dozens of recommendations based upon what we heard from people across Canada. And I'm proud of the work that we did. And I was helped by a Christian Parody in Quebec, and we presented today.
So big takeaways. Was it a leadership question? Was it, as some of the leaks have said, was it a infighting question and party division? Was it an identity crisis? What is the Conservative Party? Was it a party of Stephen Harper, or was it a party of Brian Mulroney, who appeared on the... Was there an identity crisis for the party, sir?
Well, the review dealt with a lot of different issues, and there's no one single issue, I would say, that, you know, if people are looking for the silver bullet, there is a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that go into campaigns and how you campaign. So we looked at both at party structure, we looked at caucus, we looked at the campaign team, and we looked at the leader's performance, and we looked at all those things and looked at the collective of those parts together and made recommendations on what a go forward would look like. You know, listen, Evan, I lost the last election. I lost by about 600 votes. And trust me, if anybody understands what it's like to lose, I do. And that's why I was very driven to make sure that we did a comprehensive report that will position the party better for the future.
Mr. O'Toole promised to win seats in Ontario and Quebec. Didn't happen. What went wrong in the key provinces there?
Well, there was an improvement in popular vote in many of those areas, but it wasn't enough. And it wasn't enough to win seats. And, you know, that's been widely reported on, that that we didn't gain enough support in those regions. And we made some recommendations.
Can you get into what happened? Like we all, I'm with you. We know you didn't win, and we know you didn't get enough votes. People are turning to you to find out why.
Well, I think what's more important is what are we going to do going forward? You know, as I mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of different things that go into a campaign that makes you effective or not. The campaign had a strong start. It fell off towards the end, and there's some reasons for that. But there's also things behind the scenes on how you're structured and how you execute on campaigns. All of those different items, the combination of those, are important towards how you set up the party for success. You know, the party's lost, Evan, the party didn't lose one election, we've lost 3. Yeah. And so I think the recommendations will help going into the future. Did
Mr. O'Toole introduced a price on carbon, something he had first promised not to, then he did. The Conservative Party's long campaign against it. He said we needed to modernize. Did his price on carbon plan help or hurt the party in the last election?
Well, I think there's a bunch of different positions that the party took, and whether they helped or hindered is open to debate. We made some recommendations on what we think the party should do on a go-forward basis. One thing that's clear is I think Canadians want a choice, and they want to be clear on what that choice is. So I think the party's got to be decisive. It has to be very clear on what they stand for and what is the vision for the future. And so I think that's as important. We have to look at what the results were of this election and previous ones. What's probably more important is how we position ourselves going into the future.
Well, is the future including Erin O'Toole? Was it his performance? Was it his leadership that was the problem? Can he survive this assessment and lead a winning team in the future?
Well, I can say of the participants that took place, for the large majority, they were supportive of how Erin performed within the campaign, although not entirely happy with the result. Referencing his leadership that's really up to the party and for caucus to decide. There's processes in place for that. And that's not in that. I don't make a recommendation in that within the review, other than I did speak to what the majority of folks thought when we interviewed them, and that's reflective in the report.
One of the parts of your report talked about infighting, and was infighting an issue as to who's in charge and what kind of message should there be?
Well, I think the message should be for those who want to battle internally that serves no one but the opposition. So, the parties that we're running against, I think like any organization, whether it be a political party or a business, I think dissenting opinions are important. I think it's important for you to be able to have people that have conflicting opinions, and that from that you develop better policy and better positioning. And I would say that whether that's a political party or whether that's a business.
All right, James Cumming, I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.